Now it's being recorded. Okay, I got a message that the recording is working and I can share my screen. So, okay, so we're back. Okay, someone can confirm that they're hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. I saw 9 people connected before, now looks like 11 people are connected. Probably 2 of them are me, at least 1 of them are me. So we're gonna go move forward. They say this is the future of education. Okay, so we're here, we're on our second meeting, basic AMP2. The syllabus is posted to Canvas. Make sure that you review the syllabus and you're familiar with all aspects. The major point of today is for me to present my practice lecture. So I call it a sample lecture, a sampler lecture. It's not on an AMP topic, and it does not count. The purpose is for you to hear my lecture before it counts. I put the notes to this lecture in the invite email, so you have it, and I'll put those on my screen. I'm going to find them. You can do it this way. Here we go. Okay. So this is how we're going to proceed during the semester. I'm going to give you these notes in the invite email. So I'm doing a Canvas announcement in addition to the school's Outlook email. Class time, we'll go through the notes. After the lecture, in the next invitation, I will give you a highlighted version. So for today, we're going to start here. And after we get through this, also in the email for today, there's a PDF of this document. All of our exams will be in this format. We have a multiple choice section, a definition, short answer section, fill in the blank, essay section. So this is a truncated version, so there's only a few questions in each category. Okay.
Excuse me, Professor. Can you please send us the next invitation?
Okay, say it again, please. You may have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Can you please send us the invitation and the announcements on Canvas instead of the Outlook email?
I do both.
Oh, okay, because I don't get it on Canvas. Oh, okay.
Okay, so I do a Canvas announcement, and I do Outlook.
Okay.
So, this is the format of the exam. In an actual exam, you will have 10 multiple choice questions. You have 9 definitions, 9 fill in the blanks, 3 essays, 1 5-point essay, 2 10-point essays. Each of the 3 you'll have an A or B choice. So this is just for me to familiarize yourself. These you got ahead of time, but on exam day, you will get this
So sorry
5, 10, 15 minutes.
So sorry for the interruption. The screen, your screen is not sharing. It was before.
It's not showing. Okay.
It's not showing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Try it again. You see me now?
Yes.
Okay. Why is it? Okay. So you'll get the exam in PDF. You'll get it 10 to 15 minutes before class. You'll also get an accompanying answer sheet in Word. So your instructions will be to go through the exam, put your answers on the answer sheet, and email the answer sheet back to me. So here we go. So this is our practice lecture. Purpose is you to hear my presentation before it counts. And the subject matter is evolution, which is a process, and it is accomplished by natural selection. So evolution just means change. And for biological organisms, the theory of evolution by natural selection, the hero of the day is Charles Darwin. It's called the Darwin-Wallace theory of evolution, and you'll see why it's called that. But this theory is a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is something that occurs that it changes everything after. So before Darwin, or Darwin and Wallace, no one thought this way. After Darwin and Wallace, everyone thought this way. The previous example in science of a paradigm shift was Nicholas Copernicus. So before Nicholas Copernicus, people thought that the Earth was the center of the universe and the stars and the planet moved around the Earth. Everybody thought that before. Nobody thought that after. So the fact that he changed the view of everyone, that constituted a paradigm shift. After Copernicus, the next major paradigm shift in science is Charles Darwin. Okay, so we're talking about the late 18th century, the early 19th century. So pre-Darwin, also, the theory of evolution helped establish science as the most reliable source of knowledge. So that didn't start with Darwin, but that was actually sort of reinforced by Darwin. So we're talking about the late 1700s, early 1800s. So the situation prior to Darwin, most learned people thought that the Earth was about 2,000 years old. The problem was that could not be true because there was plenty of geologic evidence that the Earth was around much, much longer than 2,000 years, and that the Earth was around much, much longer than the existence of humans. So our first guy on the parade is Cuvier. What he tried to do was justify this conflict. So learned people thought that the Earth was created when man was created, and it all happened about 2,000 years ago. There's evidence all over the place that that could not be true. So Cuvier came up with the theory of catastrophes. And his justification was that man and the Earth started about 2,000 years ago. There was the development over that time, but after about 2,000 years, there was a major catastrophe that wiped out all living things on Earth. After that catastrophe, everything started again. Okay, so man started over, animal kingdom started over. It progressed about 2,000 years, bam, another major catastrophe. So what he was trying to do was justify what the intellectuals of the time thought versus the evidence around them. And this is a little confusing because there were people who thought that the theory of catastrophes did not make sense. So he had opposition. Historically, so this is not this is not the name of the group at the time. So when historians describe this period, they say there was Cuvier, he had supporters, he had opponents. Historians have named his opponents the uniformitarians. Basically, that it was not a series of catastrophes, that history was uniform, there was uniform progress. The next guy on the scene, Lyell, Charles Lyell. So Charles Lyell was not a biologist. So he was not interested in the animal kingdom of biological processes. He was a geologist. In fact, he founded the science of geology. He was very meticulous, but in addition to being the founder of the science of geology, he also propelled scientific method. So he proceeded in a really methodical, logical way to prove his theories. And according to Lyell, the Earth was much, much older than 2,000 years. So although he was not really in the fight, he wasn't really talking about biological organisms, he sort of supported the uniformitarianisms, or they took his positions as support. And keep in mind, this is not what they call themselves. This is what people looking back on the era called them. Lyell actually became, he was a generation older than Darwin. But later in life, he became a mentor to Darwin. Darwin was really, really impressed by his method, by his use of logic, by his proceeding in a really organized way to come to scientific conclusions. So Lyell was a mentor, Darwin was a student, Charles Darwin. Okay, so really the first real biologist was actually Darwin's grandfather, Charles Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin. So at that time, one of the main activities for scientists involved in organisms was to categorize organisms. Okay, so they categorized organisms basically based on structure, on morphology. And the system of categorization that dominated was a system made by Linnaeus. And this is what we use now. Binomial nomenclature, where you have all these categories. You start with the broadest, kingdom. Is it a plant or is it animal? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So you break it down from the very, very general to the particular. One of the reasons that Linnaeus' system of, and that's called taxonomy. One of the reasons that Linnaeus' system was the one that dominated and is still in use is because you could specify an organism not by all those series of categories, but by the last two, genus, species. Binomial, two names, nomenclature. So his system, you can designate an organism by its genus and species. An example, Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus, sapiens is the species. So Grandpappy Darwin, what he did is he looked at these ways of categorizing organisms based on their structure. He basically reinterpreted it. That these things that are structurally similar, they're similar for a reason. They're similar because they have common ancestors. And basically all living items have ancestors. So no living organism is the same as it was originally. They all evolved. So basically, Darwin's grandfather sort of reinterpreted taxonomy. He reinterpreted this system of categorizing organisms. So we're getting close to our main man. Before our main man, there was Lamarck. So Lamarck is credited with having the first fully evolved theory of evolution. Okay, so he picked up where Granddaddy Darwin left off. He said, in fact, not only are organisms of a similar structure because they have common ancestor, but all organisms develop from prior organisms. That any higher forms that you see, any complex forms that you see, they evolve from simpler forms. So although Lamarck had the first full theory of evolution, he came with a flaw. So Lamarck had a big fat flaw in his thinking. And he didn't get a lot of followers because of the flaw. They could point out his easily point out his error, and the error is called inheritance based on use. Inheritance based on use. So according to Lamarck, organs develop and evolve based upon their use. So if you use it a lot, it's going to evolve. If you don't use it a lot, it's not going to evolve. And we have two examples of this inheritance based on use. The giraffe's neck. So in Lamarck's view, once upon a time, there were some giraffes, and they were feeding off of the leaves. And they overfed, and there were environmental changes. So now, after a few generations, the leaves were higher up, forcing the giraffes to stretch their necks. So they stretched their necks, they stretched their necks, they stretched their necks. The leaves were higher and higher up, and they stretched and stretched and stretched, and voila, you get giraffes with long necks. Same thing with opposable thumbs. According to inheritance based on use, so primates, including humans, their hands have digits where 4 move in one direction, and the guy on the end moves in a different direction. Really good for like handling a screwdriver. So according to inheritance based on use, how that happened is once upon a time you had primates where all the digits went in the right direction. But those primates needed to use some tools. You had some like monkey guys, and they needed to grasp reeds in order to get their food source, in order to like eat bugs. But they were grasping and grasping and grasping and grasping and grasping and grasping, and slowly over time, the guy on the end, the thumb, sort of moved over. So now it is going at a different angle. So you can grasp a reed and eat it. So even though basically Lamarck was correct that all species, all organisms evolved from some prior organisms, and that all complex forms evolved from simpler forms, he couldn't really get any traction because he had this big fat flaw in his logic, inheritance based on use. Brings us to Charles Darwin. So, yes, Charles Darwin, upper class guy, very, very bright. Left home, went to seminary. Not sure if he flunked out or he lost interest, but he ended up back home. Left home to go to law school. If he flunked out, he lost interest. Didn't really want to face his parents. So what he did is, and this is Great Britain. So in the early 1800s, 1830s, Great Britain was like the biggest, baddest country in the world. They went around colonizing other countries. They had a huge navy. And young Charles Darwin, who failed at seminary, who failed at law school, he got a job on a ship, His Majesty's ship Beagle. And they were planning a round-the-world trip that was going to take about 5 years. And in those days, part of the crew was somebody called a naturalist. What the naturalist did was basically document the places where these ships cruised to. They documented it, they collected fossils, they collected specimens. So 20 years old, failed at seminary, failed at law school. He gets on the ship. He's going to be committed to a 5-year stint. At this point, well, the most significant point in the 5 years were the time that they spent in the Galapagos Islands. These are islands off of Ecuador. So Ecuador is on the Pacific side of South America. So there's a series of islands off of Ecuador. And at this point, I have to let you know that we're sort of simplifying this because we don't want to get into a full course of evolution. In Ecuador, well, off the coast of Ecuador, in the Galapagos Islands, young Darwin, collecting fossils, collecting rocks, documenting the travels, he noticed that these islands, a row of 13 islands, all of these islands had species of small birds, finches. Every island had the small birds, and every island, the birds were different. Some were larger, some were smaller, some had big beaks, some had small beaks, some ate berries, some ate seeds. Darwin postulated that at some point in the past, these were all a part of the same group. And as they got stranded on these islands and isolated on these islands, they seemed to evolve differently. So they were now 13 different groups. So the question that Darwin was asking basically was, how do these differences develop? Started as one group, now you got 13 groups. How really did that happen? So what he's really questioning is we call biodiversity. So in addition to the people that we cited, Cuvier, Lyell, Granddaddy Darwin, and Lamarck, there's one other guy that influenced Charles Darwin. He was the leading economist of his day, Malthus. So he wasn't talking about science at all, he's talking about economics. And Malthus was studying where people live, like populations. So you have a population that starts out small, and they start out as a borough, and they become a town, and they become a small city, and they become a big city. But other places, you start out as a village and you stay a village. What's the difference? So Malthus, doing this economic analysis, the differences in the rate of growth in these places has to do with resources. And as you see this, as we go through this, you'll see that I'm using some sort of initials. And for me, they're easy to figure out. And you should catch on. Populations increase. My L office increase. Populations increase geometrically, the number of people. So you have 2, then 2 times 2 is 4, then 4 times 2 is 8. So populations, you get 2, 2 times 2, then you get 4, 4 times 4, then you get 8, 8 times 8. That's geometric increase. So the number of people are increasing at that rate, while the resources, the ability to gain resources, is increasing arithmetically, from 2 to 4 to 6 to 8. So these are multiplying, these are adding. You can see that there are more people than things that people need to use. So Malthus said at this situation, at some point, some resource is going to become the limiting factor. So what controls the growth of a town or a village is when some resource, something that everybody needs, runs out. So Darwin had this background. He knew about these different theories. He actually was a friend of Lyell. He knew about Malthus from his observations in the Galapagos that what he thought had been one species of finches, now it's 13 species of finches. Every island had a different type. And his studying was, what was the process? How do they go from one species or one group to 13 different groups? So Darwin was an upper-class guy. He ended up getting back to the UK. In London, he was like a minor celebrity, at least in the scientific community. So he's publishing papers, he's active in the scientific community. And what he does is he tries to develop his theories. He tries to get more and more examples, trying to figure out the process of going from one group to 13 different groups. He's trying to generalize it. He's trying to come up with, how does that work in finches? How does that work in plants? How does that work in pigs? How does it work in corn? He's looking for a universal process of evolution. Darwin spends his life, so he's a minor celebrity. He ends up having mentors. He ends up having followers or students. And he's collecting all this data. And what he does is he's communicating with people all over Europe. He's communicating with people anywhere under British rule. And there's all the mail is snail mail, so you want to write somebody, you put the letter on a ship and you wait for a couple of years to get a response. But one of these people, he's gathering this information, but one of the people that he's getting correspondence from is also a naturalist. From the UK, he's a naturalist, same job as Darwin had on the Beagle. But somehow, this guy got stuck in Malaysia. So he never really comes back from Malaysia. I don't know, something about, pregnant girl. And anyway, he gets stuck in Malaysia. He's corresponding with Darwin. Darwin is gathering this evidence to try to fill out his theory of evolution. Darwin's followers, his students, they realize in his correspondence that the ideas that Darwin has worked out over a long period of time, this guy in Malaysia has sort of figured it out. And his followers pushed Darwin to publish a paper with Alfred Wallace. Basically, they don't want Alfred Wallace to get the drop on them, and then Darwin wouldn't get any credit. So somehow they manipulate Wallace into agreeing to a joint paper presenting the theory of evolution, 1858. The next year, 1859, Darwin publishes all his findings. He has a huge manuscript, Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, where he presents what he believes is the process universal to all living organisms, how they go from one species, as in the finch, to 13 species in 13 different places. So, the theory of evolution, natural selection. So everything changes. The process of change for biological organisms is called natural selection. And basically, this theory is there are three steps. There's variation, limited resources, selection advantage. variations. All populations, all the individuals aren't the same. In any group, there's like tall ones, there's short ones, there's fat ones, there's thin ones, there's energetic ones, there's lazy ones. So there's all kind of characteristics, individual characteristics within one group. As far as evolution, it doesn't really matter. All these characteristics they don't really impact the future until something that everyone needs starts to run out. Limited resources. Okay. My poor example is, poor analogy is you're living on a block and there is a family near the end of the block where mom is 6'2", dad is 6'4", and the kid is 6'7". The women all work as waitresses, the guys all work as truck drivers. Doesn't really matter if you're 6'2" or 6'4", or 6'7". What happens if there's some sort of situation where the only way to survive, the only way to have an income is to play professional basketball? All of a sudden, those sort of freaky people at the end of the block, they now have an advantage. So there's variation in every population, but the situation can change to where there's something that everyone needs that starts to run out. This creates a selection pressure. And if there are individuals with characteristics that can enable them to obtain the limited resource at a higher rate, those people now have a selection advantage. So the people with, or the organisms, the individuals with the selected advantage will tend to live longer, to reach maturity longer, to reproduce more. The children will have this characteristic that they need. They're going to live longer. They can reproduce more. Differential survival. So now you have a subpopulation that is outliving and out-reproducing everybody else in the population. That is called fitness. So survival of the fittest is not really who can beat up anybody. The survival of the fittest is what group can get the most individuals to maturity, to reproduce, and to have their offspring have that special characteristic that's going to make them live to maturity and reproduce. So fitness. So the individuals with the advantage are the fit individuals, or the fit group. There's another word here, fecundity. Fecund, reaching maturity, reproducing at a higher rate than everybody else reproduces. So basically, this is Darwin's theory of natural selection. It applies to humans, it applies to mosquitoes, it applies to different types of grasses, to elephants, a universal process. This is how species go from simple to complex. There's variation within the population. At some point, something that everyone needs runs out. This creates a selective pressure. Who can get this real resource? And any subgroup with a characteristic that allows them to obtain this resource has the advantage. Those are the folks who are going to be fit. Differential survival. So you get individuals to the subpopulation, they're going to live longer, they're going to reproduce more. They're going to start eventually dominating that population and dominating the entire species. So you can go from a small advantage to dominating the entire species. This process of natural selection introduces a big role of chance. Okay. So maybe the people who had the advantage is because they could swim and there was a big flood. Or there was some sort of random gene mutation. Okay. So you have a group of people that are sort of entertainers, and you got generation and generation, and then all of a sudden somebody produces Beyonce. How did that happen? That was a random occurrence. So evolution by natural selection introduces probability and chance. Also, this theory of evolution, the Darwin-Wallace theory of evolution, unifies biology. So this is what ties different branches of biology: microbiology, ecology, anatomy. What these different things have to do with each other is that they're all sort of center around the Darwin-Wallace theory of evolution. So we're going to end by getting into irony and paradox. So Darwin and Wallace basically could understand what Linnaeus could not. So Linnaeus categorizing those organisms based on structure, but he had no idea how you go from simple to complex. He just categorized based on what he saw, so the phenotype. Darwin and Wallace basically understood the general process, but they had no idea of the driving force. What drives natural selection is genetics. They had no idea of genetics. Their theory was about the gross, about the big picture. They had no idea that there were genes driving it. And the irony is that during Darwin's day, he was like an elite guy. He was a minor celebrity. He became more than minor. He became the man. While he was doing this, tucked away in Austria was a monk, Mendel, who was figuring out genetics. So Darwin had no concept of the driving force of evolution, which is genetics. And this guy in the monastery, his work did not come to light until the 20th century. And the second part of this is that Mendel really didn't know the driving force of genetics, DNA. DNA drives genetics. Genetics drives natural selection. One other thing I'm going to throw in here that I skipped somewhere in these notes. The Darwin-Wallace theory of evolution was controversial because it was mechanistic. Probability. Things did not evolve for the better. It was directionless. Things did not evolve to be closer to God, did not evolve to be natural, to be close to perfect. No goal, no direction, no morality, not progressive. Things are going to change, but the change is directionless. The change is driven by the resources, the environment. What characteristic is actually going to become an advantage? Okay, I am done. One other thing I need you to do, we are scheduled for 1 o'clock and 6:30. I need you to send me an email giving me a preference. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So far, only 4 students have emailed me a preference. But as we go along, this is a Monday, Wednesday class, and I'm just going to go with one time, either 1 o'clock or 6:30, majority rules. Email me your preference, and starting on Monday, we're going to go with one session. Those who cannot connect to that session will have to rely on the recordings.
Professor Hayward.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. On the sampler exam, on the essay, how many paragraphs are you looking for?
I'm looking for just a succinct, complete answer.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sometimes 1 or 2, 3, 4 sentences do it. Sometimes it takes a lot more.
Okay.
Depending on how clearly you write.
Okay.
But this is just a sample. What I'm going to do is, by the time I send out my next class email, I will have gone through these exams. Hopefully somebody in the class gives me a really good essay. And I'm going to distribute that essay so you can compare that essay with your essay. So you have a PDF. Okay, so I gave you this in PDF, and I gave you an answer page.
Correct.
Okay, so just based upon this talk, based upon my notes, based upon any notes you took, go at it.
Professor?
And it's due tonight, correct? Or just due by the end of the night, or do you have a deadline?
I don't have a deadline.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
But I think if you don't do it, you lose out.
No, I am. No.
No, I'm saying that because, well, some other class. I had some other class where I only got like a couple of responses. Everybody sat through all of this. It's also my other A&P2 class. They sat through the whole thing, and I got a couple of people who actually responded so far. But this is going to be important because all of your exams are going to be in this exact same format. A quarter multiple choice, a quarter definition, a quarter fill in the blank, a quarter essay.
All right,
Professor Hayward?
Yes.
I never got the course code for the ebook. The textbook.
Okay. So do me a favor, because I haven't looked into that yet. But I have a couple of people have made this request from me. Send me an email. So when I figure this out, I can get that information to you. It's going to take a week or so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In fact, I already sent out a query. I sent it out to the department head already. But I'm going to give you answer. Okay, so I have 2 queries now, and send me an email so I'm going to add your name to that list. When I get the information, I'll give it to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Okay, so you can do this tonight. You can do this in the morning, but do it when you can. And get it to me, and also give me your vote.
Question, please.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to copy paste the questions on the answer sheet, or just put the answer on the sheet?
No, you won't, no, just the answers.
Okay, thank you.
Just the answers.
Okay.
Okay? So add your answers to the answer sheet. Answer sheets are in Word. You email them to me. I will collect them. I will save them. I will correct them. And I will email them back to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, okay.
All right. Okay, so we have, looks like we got about 10 people. Yeah, I wasn't able to make the earlier class. I actually worked through the class. You know, I'm not familiar with my schedule yet. But hopefully people who do not connect will get this recording soon, and they can listen to the recording. They also have the PDF, and they also have the answer sheet, so there's no excuse for you not doing the sample or exam. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a
And
good
I
night.
will, right, I'll see you on Monday.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, bye.
Have a good night.